Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us to learn more about indigenous food product development. First, before we start the presentation, I would like to invite Chef Miller to give us land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Dr. Kuo. I'm so happy we're all here today. On the screen, you see a few of the peoples and ancestors who have utilized this land. And I want to affirm that this is not an extensive list. This was a very popular area because of the climate and the waters. And I've been thinking a lot about this because I've been reading about how land acknowledgements are bougie and they just kind of smooth over and make white people not feel guilty about appropriation. And that we shouldn't be giving them as a result of that. And I've thought a lot about that, and I think I disagree because from my perspective, I still, when I go outside, like when I was walking here today, I still feel the ancestors here. And so I would like to acknowledge that and all the peoples of this place that have come before, and thank you all for being here today.
Thank you, Chef Thiam. We have the honor to invite our community advisor and partners to remote in or come here in person to tell us a bit about what they have been doing in the communities. First, let us welcome Chef Thiam.
Hello everyone. My name is Chef Sherman and I am from Senegal. I can describe my mission as introducing the food culture of my origins to a global platform. Yeah, I'm from Senegal, arrived in New York City almost 33 decades ago, and worked in various restaurants, really not finding my voice in this cuisine. Really, I was, in the so-called food capital of the world, and I felt like Africa was absent in that cuisine. So I saw it as an opportunity, and I never looked back. I just from working to Italian and French and American restaurants, I really thought bringing food from my memory, really food that I grew up eating in Senegal, was very important to this conversation. Even more important because I believe this food that came from West Africa has had a strong influence in the Americas, because of the Middle Passage. The impact it had, it can be still traced and tasted when you travel all the way from the Carolinas, north and south, throughout New Orleans, Louisiana. Dishes that are iconic to this culture here, such as gumbo, jambalaya, hopping jones, and ingredients so that came from West Africa through the Middle Passage, like rice. Many people don't collect rice with being an ingredient that arrived in the Americas from West African farmers who knew how to do it. I call them farmers. They were captive Africans that came and brought this cuisine here. And that goes all the way to like the south, Brazil, Ecuador, Mexico. Even Mexico itself, people don't connect that Mexico even had a strong influence of West African cuisine. You take a dish like tamales. Tamales is directly connected with what we call amala in Western Africa. And if you go to the northern part of Mexico where tamales is originally from, you will see that they still prepare it with that same method, wrapping up in banana leaves instead of the corn leaves. So those are the different facts that just convinced me into really making this a mission. It became a life mission, and that's really interesting to see what the sous chef is doing with his approach to cuisine and that angle, because he's telling a story that needs to be retold through the food, and I think this is what's important with what we are doing, what I'm doing too, is really telling that story that our food is a food that's resilient, and that's a food that's really should be more considered for different reasons. Not only the fact that it's also a healthy approach to cooking, you look at the cuisine of West Africa, it's a cuisine that has on the pyramid, it's mostly plant-based, and those vegetables and those grains tend to disappear, if we don't, as chefs, if we don't put them on our menus, if we don't talk about them, if, what I've been doing is, I think, taking it even further to have a wider audience is to really even brand those products and package them and introduce them to global platforms through supermarkets and online e-commerce distribution. So I've started a brand called Yolele, and I work with small farmers from West Africa, from an area that's called the Sahel, which is very dry and arid. But they have crops that are not only great for the environment, but they are also very nutritious. So I package those products and distribute them in different supermarkets across the U.S. at Whole Foods and Target and etc. So that's the goal. And now we started even packaging those products into chips as well, which is entering the fast-moving category of snacks, which is also going to allow to tell the story and at the same time reach a wider audience. So basically, this is a little bit of a summary of how I am working with the community.
Thank you so much, Chef Thiam. Chef Thiam's work inspired our lab to work with smallholder women farmers in Senegal, particularly the Kaffrine region, to develop Bon Bon Bui peanut nutrition bar using indigenous plants, which you will be tasting. If you wait patiently a little bit longer after the presentation, we'll get to present the product to you. Next, we have the pleasure and honor to invite Patrick Yawakie, who is the co-founder of People's Food Sovereignty Program on the Flathead Reservation. He drove all the way yesterday from Polson to here, 4.5 hours.
So while they get it set up again, my name is Patrick Yawakie. I'm a Zuni Pueblo tribal member, also Turtle Mountain Anishinaabe and White Bear Dakota Cree from Saskatchewan, Canada. I moved to the Flathead Reservation in 2016. I graduated at SKC, or Sioux College, in Tribal Administration and Governance. I think, and then also along with my wife, who's co-founder, Regina Madplume, we used our education that we received at Sioux College, her in Tribal Historic Preservation, and mine in Tribal Administration and Governance, to create a food system plan, implementation plan that we have presented to Confederated Sioux tribes twice now, 2017 and 2019. And a little background, it's focused on cultural preservation, definitely on my wife's educational path, utilizing tribal historic preservation as a way to conserve our culture through human resources, our people, our tribal members, trying to conserve their health so that they have longevity, that our traditions can be carried on to the next generation without any complications. Also with my tribal administration and governance, focused on policy and government, how we can create programs, how we can create a food system within our tribal governments to try to utilize food sovereignty, combat food insecurity, also create educational programs. Sioux Community College is located right across the street from the government there in Pavel, Montana. So really utilizing the resources that are available on the reservation. The Flathead Reservation is the 10th largest reservation, has amazing natural resources, water, clean water, abundance of land. They just acquired the National Bison Range, so it's now under management of the tribe. Utilizing both the cultural retention and also how we can decolonize our local tribal governments, our food systems, create educational programs through this, and then also fighting food insecurity on the reservation is our major goals. This is just an example of one of the feeds that we had in our last election in 2020, utilizing food sovereignty, not just to feed our communities, but also push change through policy, and definitely at the state and federal level, being able to say that we use food sovereignty for other things too as well. So People's Food Sovereignty Program started out of response to COVID. We created an organization on the Flathead Reservation that was feeding supplying food distribution for mutual aid. This was both through tribal and tribal and non-tribal participants. We were feeding about 500 people a week. We went through almost $500,000 worth of funding in the initial CARES Act funding. That's where we're receiving most of our funding from through the Tribal Council, CSKG Tribal Council. And so through that effort, because we were supplying a lot of food to tribal members, a lot of them were speaking out saying we're wishing for wild game or other needs. So like traditional medicines or traditional plants and other things like that. And so we created a People's Food Sovereignty Program out of response to that need. We were able to start off our program with, it was during the Thanksgiving, Christmas times, we were able to acquire some turkeys that we were able to initiate our distribution program out of. A unique thing about our distribution in comparison to like our food banks on the reservation, we don't necessarily require a lot of needs assessment paperwork that the food banks do. Also, we deliver the food to the household, which the food banks do not. And so this is a partnership that we had receiving turkeys during that season. And we started out with 70 households, about 120 partnership or participants. This last summer, we were able to create a collaboration with students from the University of Montana Missoula campus, also community organizations out of Missoula, where we created a gardening distribution program where we got out 50 gardening beds. This included dirt, shovels, hoses, all the tools that they need, and also a variety of seedlings that students out of the University of Missoula grew out of greenhouses on the campus, and we were able to distribute, it was about 15 to 20 varieties of vegetables, pollinators, and fruits to those gardening beds. We were able to also get an article in the Tarkusta. This is the Confederacy of Chincoteague Tribes primary newspaper, and we were able to get an article, and this is my wife Regina here on the left. This is also just touching on the collaborations. We're really focused on understanding that with food sovereignty we're able to create economies from the ground up, and so we really want to be able to utilize the tribal membership as a labor source, and so we've been able to really open up these opportunities to people who don't necessarily have these opportunities widely available to them. And also working with this is the university and then also some other local organizations that helped assist, just some of the breakdown. We acquired a lot of our materials for this project through donation from the U of M. The Wolfson Center was going through reconstruction, and then they were getting rid of their organic garden, and so we were able to receive it was up to $40,000 in refurbished materials. And then this is just touching on some of the installations of the gardening beds and some of the success of those. This is a young child watering gardening bed, and so this was an article from Abundant, Montana that or a post that they made, and we were able to share that too as well. Just touch on our latest program, which was started out of 2020, out of a donation from the National Bison Range, where we received eight culled elk, where we were able to receive these elk from the Bison Range, and then we assisted in the processing fees. We were able to utilize local meat processors on the reservation, and this was all done through CARES Act funding that was allocated through CSKG Tribal Council. This year we're able to receive a couple donations or a couple of grants from First Nations Development Institute to expand our capacity for our elk and deer meat distribution. Now we're able to purchase things such as freezer trailers and some other processing equipment that we need. And we've now expanded our program to include a tribal hunters list, where we have over 20 tribal hunters that are on the list that we can reach out to, that we are providing fuel reimbursements or ammunition reimbursements to these hunters for either deer or elk. And then also, but a lot of the times we're witnessing that this just gives an opportunity for tribal members to, be tribal. A lot of them do not request any reimbursements, so a lot of these hunters just are good at hunting, or they're really good hunters, and they feel gratification, understanding that they know that their meat is going to be going to tribal homes, and so a lot of them just are working with us in a very collaborative way, and we appreciate that assistance in our program. But now we're feeding over 700 participants in our program. Also getting out to over 200 tribal households within the reservation. This includes CSKT tribal members, but also because of Salish Community College and what the Flathead Reservation offers, there's a very diverse tribal community on the reservation. It has not just Salish, Kasanka, and Pondere people, but also Blackfeet are there in abundance. SKC, the Salish Community College, is like essentially a hub for Indian country in terms of people coming there to go to college, and a lot of them do stay, and there's a lot of culture there. So our program gets to tribal, CSKT tribal households, but also those tribal members from other federally recognized tribes. We have a couple of projects coming up here. We're working with a local school to implement a Indigenous garden, and with also curriculum attached to that on the reservation, and then also we'll be starting a Indigenous restaurant in Missoula, along with a processing and food lab in downtown Missoula as well. So that's a little bit about People's Food Sovereignty Program. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Patrick is on our Western Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Grant. He inspired us and he supported our students to engage with CSKT Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribe members to develop indigenous food products, which you will be tasting today. So just be a little more patient. It's going to come out cooking in the back. Now, next we have Amy Vaughn from Boys and Girls Club on the Flathead Reservation. She's going to remote in to talk a little bit about the Boys and Girls Club.
My name is Amy Vaughn, and I am the Director of Operations here at the Boys and Girls Club of the Flathead Reservation in Lake County. A little bit about us. We have been on the reservation, or a part of the reservation, since 1999. We started with a 3,000 square foot club right by the Dairy Queen, actually, in Ronan. And now we, a little over 20 years later, we have two clubs that are large. We have two 30,000 square foot clubs, one that's in Ronan, one that's in Polson. And then we've just started a new club that is in St. Ignatius as part of it's actually housed in the mission schools. So we're growing, and our long-term strategic plan is to have some sort of presence in as many of the communities as we possibly can on the reservation. But we really believe that each community, if it is a right fit for us to be there, then the community will support it, and it will come in its own time at the same time. So we are just actually finished an annual report for 2021. We served just over 600 kids through 2021 with approximately 50,000 meals served in that time. And we participate in the USDA food program, similar to what the schools participate in. We try really hard, though, to take advantage of local services as much as we possibly can, and just to support our own community in that. We also run programs that focus on healthy eating, healthy lifestyles, that type of stuff. including a diabetes prevention program that we start educating kids when they turn 7 about how not to get diabetes as adults. And what we've just found is if you can teach kids to make healthy decisions early in life, that it empowers them to learn how to make those decisions later on in life. Along the same lines, that is also pivoted into a pretty substantial garden program. We have garden beds in our Ronan and Polson clubs, and we're waiting to see how the St. Ignatius School Districts puts together their garden club or their garden areas so that we can be a part of that in the summertime as well. Our beds, our raised beds are really focused on foods that kids like to eat. So they tend to graze through them most of the summer. But also we have that hope of being able to have those foods be something that all the extra pieces of it can go on to the families, that they can also be a part of that. We are working on developing a stronger family engagement component to that process, with a hope, hopefully by the end of this summer, to actually have like cooking classes that we bring parents in to cook with their kids with many of the things that they're raising in the gardens, and then also other foods, the things that we would bring into it, other products that are easily and readily available for families, so that the meals are not something crazy and hard and all that stuff, but they're easily replicated when they go home. And so it's a big vision, I guess I would say, but we're always striving to be an organization that's trying to be a relevant part of our community. And connecting as many pieces of the process together as we possibly can. So in that's how we have started building this relationship with MSU and the Food Development Lab, and engaging the kids in the process of that. And that's been really exciting for us as well. So another piece that I guess I would say that we're working to improve upon is to really tie more culture into not just our food program, but into all the pieces of the club. And so we are looking to hire a cultural specialist specific to be our champion internally for that process. And our hope again in that is that it be seasonally, culturally relevant, I guess I should say, but I don't know, I guess where we really want culture in the clubs to be something that is just organic to what we do, not a class that we do. And so excited about that. Hopefully we'll have that up and going here in the next little bit. So as an organization, we're also doing a ton of different things. I could go on and on and on about all the different programs. At the core of it, we are trying to put as many different opportunities in front of kids so that they can hopefully find that passion for themselves that just ultimately helps them to be the best version of themselves as they grow up as adults. You never know where a life or how life is going to be changed, and so that how are we going to change a life really just drives everything that we do here in the club. So I'm super glad to be part of this conversation, and thanks. And if anybody wants to reach out and volunteer or be a part, we always love to have new people come in and be a part of our organization.
Thank you, Amy. Amy is a big supporter to help Genesis, our graduate student, working with kids on the Flathead Reservation on developing bison pemmican-inspired cracker that you also taste today. Thank you again, Chef Thiam, Patrick, and Amy for your support. Your work inspired us to do our work in our lab. My name is Wan-Yuan Kuo, Assistant Professor of Food Science, Montana State University, also the Director of MSU Food Product Development Lab. Our lab mission is developing healthy products for both humans and the earth. We use interdisciplinary research and participatory action research approach to engage community members, learning from their traditional wisdom, integrating with our food science and technology knowledge, using local and indigenous foods to create food products that are nutritious, eco-friendly, and culturally responsive. Under this framework, we have 3 research programs: indigenous food, specialty crops, such as bison, such as berries and lentils and chickpeas. And also developing these products, working with Montana Team Nutrition to bring these products to our next generation young children. So today's focus is, of course, indigenous food. Why such a focus? See, I got a PhD in food science. It's a pretty fancy title. The term food science and indigenous food, however, never came across each other in my professional or personal life until the year of 2018. In 2018, I sat in the lecture of Chef Sherman. Of course, like everybody else, I was deeply touched and motivated. But toward the last 1/3 of his talk, I was in complete shock. He mentioned the term nixtamalization. I did not know what it was. Nixtamalization is a technique invented by the indigenous people of the Americas to make the best use of corn's nutrition to advance and protect the health of generations, hundreds of years of people of the Americas. With decades of food technology, processing engineering, I even had food and technology training. No one in my education ever taught me what nixtamalization is. Even they even mentioned to me. That shock forced me to reflect on what I have missed in the pursuit of that PhD in food science degree. And how much today as an educator, how much we must change what we teach our students. So with our students, we started working with indigenous communities. Indigenous communities, the people are only 5% of global population. However, the land they reside in protect 80% of the global remaining biodiversity. So they protect our future. We must work with them. With the generous support of partners, including Bounty Field International, a nonprofit based in Minneapolis, and Umbrella Support Unit, a nonprofit based in Senegal, we're able to work with smallholder women farmers to develop peanut nutrition bar using indigenous plants. With the generous support of the Salish Kootenai College Business Program and Confederated Salish and Kootenai Tribes, we work with SKC tribal students on co-developing and co-promoting native products. So now I'm going to invite my students to start talking about our first project, Senegal project, and then we're going to present you our mobile green nutrition bar.
Thank you, Dr. Kuo. My name is Edwin Allan, and I'm from Damolgo in northern Ghana. I'm pursuing an individual interdisciplinary PhD at MSU, and my interests are in food processing to promote food sovereignty.
My name is Ed. I'm from St. Paul, Minnesota, in the Twin Cities, and I'm an undergrad in sustainable food systems and agroecology. Specifically, very interested in agroecology and especially looking at the social movements within that, and food system change, food system resiliency, and indigenous and bioregional cuisine and how that can look modern era.
So, commodity farming and industrialization have increased food availability across the globe, but there's the consequence of losing our indigenous crops. In 2018, I started a partnership with Senegalese women farmers in 4 communities in the Kafin region. And in our first interview, the woman leader of the Ndagan community said, "We used to harvest gum from the forest to make couscous for children, but the forest has become farmland. Now we ride horse car for 4 hours to get imported gum." That's highlighting the loss of indigenous crops and forest in the Kafin region of Senegal. So, to combat the effect of commodity farming, we decided to use indigenous crops to make a peanut nutrition bar. So, we selected local and indigenous nutritious ingredients to provide a nutrition bar that gives an alternative to imported peanut snacks, provides nutrition to school-age children, and also helps to protect the local forest and wild plants. So I present to you Bonbon Bui. Bonbon Bui is a peanut nutrition bar that is currently being made by women farmers in the Kafin region of Senegal. And this peanut nutrition bar is made from peanuts, cowpea, and corn, which are grown and harvested by the women farmers in Senegal, and also includes baobab pulp powder, which is a wild plant in Senegal and much of West Africa. Combining these ingredients, we made Bonbon Bui, and Bonbon Bui gives the women a chance at being entrepreneur farmers. Because by working with the MSU Food Product Development Lab, we're able to improve shelf life and improve textural stability, which is needed to sell a value-added product on the market.
So moving forward, what's been really critical to this work and any work that's been done with this project so far is the collaborations with community stakeholders and community groups, specifically with the smaller women's groups in Ndagan, Senegal, the Kafin region. And from that, we have a team that is diverse in background and interdisciplinary in nature. A combination of what we bring from the university, Western science, food science, and also the traditional knowledge that's held in communities that is and has been exploited. It's our hope with this project to create a participatory action research model that includes the members of the community as researchers themselves rather than as participants of the study. So that the work that we're doing can, in hope, be by the community and not for the community or projected onto a community. The first step of this project was Bonbon Bui, which was developed in 2018, and we hope to continue to work and co-innovate indigenous products, specifically fermented foods, with the community in Ndagan. Right now, we're in the middle of the process of commercializing Bonbon Bui with the groups in Ndagan. So in the spring of 2021, the women told us that they wanted to contribute to their local economy. And in the summer, as a result, Ali Nadaye, who is here today, collaborated with the Cadillac Chamber of Commerce to deliver trainings on some basic post-harvest production technologies so that the women might have a more autonomous approach to processing their food and being able to make it into products for themselves and sell it in the community. In the fall, a pitch was delivered to the African Development Bank, and very fortunately they agreed to completely fund the construction of a facility where products can be harvested and processed by the women farmers and the community in Ndagan. This space also brings the opportunity to hold meeting spaces and to share knowledge from food system exchange and to hopefully bring children into the picture and bring families in so that the space can be used for meals and can be used for learning and also for processing and value-added production of these products. It's our ultimate hope to collaborate with schools in Senegal and the World Food Program to bring together smallholder farmer groups and school-age children so that these ingredients and knowledge pathways that have been lost through a lot of processes like urbanization and globalization and modernization in Senegal can be reconnected, and then children who, as we see, are vital inheritors of the food system. It's very rapidly changing, globalizing, and in some ways, many ways, going in a negative direction. So it's our hope to share those knowledge points and help facilitate that through stakeholders in the community to schools, ultimately creating a more resilient food system and one that's more adaptable to the change that's coming in decades.
Thanks so much, Edwin and Ed. Now let us welcome our next student presenter, James. He's going to talk about the fish skin taco that he created in his class.
How's it going, everybody? My name is James Vallie. I'm a Salga tribal member. It's original Crow territory, so just letting you guys know that. Welcome. I'm enrolled in the chemical engineering program here on campus. I graduated in 2020 with my bachelor's. I'm now in the master's program, should be finishing in the spring. So, a lot of the chemical engineering I went through was really industrialized, petroleum, oil, gas, all these things. But, on the back end, no one realizes that chemical engineering is food, right? Who made all these recipes, all the things that people make? There's formulation scientists, chemists that make all these foods and things for people to eat. So I really wanted to get into that, and I felt like there were two things that really put together. So, Dr. Kuo was doing the classes at the time. She made a food product development engineering class, or food engineering. Experimental food engineering, that was the class. So I was able to get okayed by my electives for chemical engineering, and that was my whole food journey up till now. I've always cooked and liked food, so it was great to take this class. Next slide. So here's what we did with the Flathead tribes. It's not just the Flathead tribes, it's a coalition of tribes. The CSKT is what they say, it's the Confederate Salish tribes and Kootenai tribes. There's also the Ponderay in that area, so it's right that we acknowledge everybody in the area. So we went to that area and talked with them. We had focus groups for a few weeks here throughout the whole class period, and we did community feedback on different products. And you can see some of the fish tacos made out there, Chef. Basically, there's 2 different sauces. We have a cherry sauce and a hascap or honeyberry sauce. So we have 2 different experiences there. But so we went to this class and we wanted to make a product that the tribal people can use, something that's in collaborative effect with them, not something that we tell them to make, or something that here's something that you know how to make, and we're going to help you make it. It's a collaborative effect. And this is what we did, and also facilitating access to traditional foods, and that's a bit of a hot topic, and it's really hard to make that acceptable by both sides. It's a really hard, fine line. So we'll talk a little bit about that next slide. So there's this company or incorporated business in Flathead tribe there called Native Fish Keepers. Their whole drive is to reduce the amount of lake trout in the area, because the lake trout is a non-native species of fish in the area. It was brought in and thrown in the lake a long time ago for fishermen to have sport fish. But because of that, the bull trout, the cutthroat trout, the native species that the tribes traditionally eat, they're starting to get beat out by these lake trout. The lake trout are so much more competitive and eat actually a lot of the young babies of the bull trouts and cutthroat. So a big part of this whole program is they're conserving the native species by taking out the non-native species. Now, what do you do with this non-native species, right? As indigenous people, we don't just waste stuff. So this fish they take, they created an income stream using non-native species to benefit the tribe. I'll talk about that in a second. And they just captured them and processed them. The next slide here. As you can see here, here's a processing. I can't remember what this machine was called. Like the Salmon Skinner 10,000, I don't know, some cool name. But they'll cut off the heads of the lake trout. They send them through this machine, and it splits it right down the middle into 2 fillets. And what's left at the end is the bones and the guts, and it drops it all at the bottom. And that was really interesting to me. In order to make it profitable for the tribe or to help this conservation effort, all of these fillets go back into they go to sell them, and they package them, they freeze them, and then they sell them, and the money comes back into the conservation efforts to help keep these native fish species viable in the future. And it was pretty cool. I talked to him, I asked them, what do you do with the guts and bones? He's like, well, all that's used, it goes into compost, they make animal feed, and then the feed goes to the animals. So, everything's kind of being used at this point. And I'm like, this is the indigenous way, right? This is what natives do. We use every piece of it. But one thing he mentioned was, hey, the only thing that doesn't get used is the fish skin. it got me thinking. I was like, well, that's interesting, right? What do we do with the fish skin? I started thinking and thinking, and next slide. And so that kind of ended up to where we are today. Through all of the focus groups, we tried different fish smoked recipes because we wanted to take a product that they're using to help conserve native fish. We want to take that, make a product for them, and be able to provide that for the tribes or the community. And a big part of that, it's hard to to go into a community and try to learn and then make products. Like, where's the line of taking versus helping? That's a really, really tough subject to talk about, but it needs to be said. One thing that happens a lot traditionally in history is a lot of people would come in and kind of take certain knowledge, certain plants, ingredients, and then they would make an indigenous inspired product. And that's all fine and good, but it tends to not benefit the tribe anymore. At some point it gets extracted and kind of pulled over here, and where's the community? Where's the tribe? And that's one thing I think we all need to keep in mind and be conscious of going forward is we need to keep these closed, these bridges connected. You can't remove it from the people that it was from. So I think that's just a big thing I wanted to notice or to talk about. And so the smoking process, a lot of the Flathead tribal people there in that area, they smoke their fish. And we went through different trials, we tried different woods. There's alder, maple, apple, cherry wood, all these different things. And it ended up being, I think the cherry and the apple and the maples were kind of the better tasting woods. And it was really interesting because we did a lot of the focus group analysis with a really cool application, but it showed us how much people liked the smokiness versus the flavor versus the saltiness. So you were able to see all the different interests, the likes, the dislikes of all the people. So we went with the most well-liked smoked flavor and also the brine flavor too. We had different brines, using maple, sugars, honeys, all kinds of different things. And we ended up getting the right ratio of salt to water ratio for water activity on the fish so it doesn't spoil. But this was the whole thing we were trying to do for this class was if we could create this product that's viable for them to make not only just the fish fillets, but now a value-added product where more people can buy it. They can sell it for more. You add value to the product, and more of that will go into to benefiting the tribe or the people of the area. But one thing we did with the fish product was at the end, anybody can buy a smoked fish fillet, right? And there's plenty of them out there. But what do you do with it at the end of it? And that's where we went full circle. I was like, that I've been thinking about that fish skin for a long time since we left that place. And I was like, hey, a lot of people can't eat corn. A lot of people can't eat, gluten or threads or certain corn taco, like different taco material and ingredients. So the indigenous way is to not waste anything, right? The fish skin was just being wasted. So I proposed, let's cook this fish skin. And this was a long time ago. When I was young, we would get fish fillets, we would fry them in a pan, just pan fried. But I always used to like eating the skin at the end. It's real crispy and chewy and it tastes good and it's fishy and oily and then that fried flavor. So when I thought about that, I was like, hey, let's make the taco out of the fish skin. And so that's what we ended up getting is the fish skin taco. And then here's another Baja fish taco. That was just a recipe that we could put on the back of this product in case the tribe wanted to take this product and move forward with it. And once we made this product, at the end of it, we were hoping that the tribe would take it and use this product and make their own smoked fish from here. And also another intent was that tribal businesses, tribal food enterprises, things that are trying to highlight traditional native foods or just indigenous food in general, and the whole feeling of it. This is something that we hope people would like to use. We don't own this. This is a fish product. It's fish, that we help with the Flathead tribe, and it was in collaboration with them. So no one really owns it. If anyone in the tribe would have most of the rights to it because we work with them directly. And I think that's how it should be. If you work with the tribe, work with the people, I think they should directly benefit and not be removed from the whole thing. I just want to remind everybody of that. Next slide, please. And here's basically the different fish products that we made at the end. Another part of the class was to make labels, to look at all the different regulatory things, fish ingredients, things like that. We had a whole class on putting together an ingredient label, looking at nutrition facts, all that. And there's a lot of math that went into all the different ratios and amounts and the water phase and the salt and all that stuff. But that was kind of fun for me in the class. But we did all of these, and this was our product at the end of it. We had two little names, smoked lake trout, and then this one was my favorite, lake to plate catchphrase. It's coining that right now. So, but that was a pretty interesting thing. And then, so this is the whole intent was to add value to an already existing native product or process, or type of method of making foods. And all we would do is, hey, there's a few other things you can add in there by using your own native ingredients. And generally, you know, like natives, we have all the ideas, we have the flavors, we have the ingredients, the meats, all the things. We even have resources, but we don't have the infrastructure to, you know, to lift us up, to help us make these products, to help us get big scale, and to be viable. You know, we end up fighting the FDA and the USDA a lot of times on our traditional processes, which has allowed us to survive for thousands of years. You know, and in this way, what's more of a right way? Something that helps people survive. If it wasn't good, it wouldn't be around still. We wouldn't have been here this long. So I think that's one thing that I really enjoy about indigenous food. You know, it's always been here. It's always going to be here in the future. And people are just not starting to pick it back up and realize all these amazing flavors and tastes and everything that indigenous food and ingredients have to offer. But here we have the fish skin tacos going out now, so please enjoy it. If you don't like fish skin, you're not about it, there's a couple corn tacos there for you not so crazy people. You have to be a little crazy to try fish skin taco. We have 2 different berry drizzles. One of them is a cherry, a dwarf sour cherry from the Flathead area. So that was another thing, trying to highlight from the area and some of their berries. You know, they have cherries in that area. Unfortunately, not all of it's being harvested by natives. It's a lot of kind of outside the tribe, which is interesting, right? But this is the whole thing. You know, there's a whole conversation that needs to be had about where our product comes from. You know, if it's an indigenous product, how indigenous is it? You know, where does it come from? We got to put everybody back together, get a community working to where we're all helping each other to move into the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, James. Great presentation to all students. Don't be scared of the skin. It's actually pretty good. Just try and be brave today. Next.
Hello. It's a pleasure for me to be here. I arrived to Montana on January 2021, and it was life-changing for me coming from Nicaragua, the very tropical weather, to another extreme weather. But I felt pretty ignorant about the American culture, and that was when everything changed. So I studied food science and technology in college, but I felt like, okay, we've been trained to mass produce, to feed people, but where's the sustainability part? I never heard anything about sustainable production, and I never heard the term food sovereignty. That was unknown to me. And so I have been working in the food product development lab, and so that's a photo of me. I am a folklore dancer. I've been dancing for more than 10 years. Fortunately, the dress is heavy and I couldn't bring an extra luggage with the dress. So my current career interest is to work in the food policy area because I have come to this realization that the more higher you go, the more power you have to influence those decisions. And policymakers have actually the power to redirect the global food system. And so I would really love to make those changes to work with minority groups and to give them the access that they deserve to healthy diets that are not only healthy for humans but also healthy for the environment. And so this was a really important quote for my current work. High cost of traditional foods like buffalo, deer meat, like meat schools to offer these in their menu. So prior to joining, I started hearing about the work that the laboratory was doing with the CSKT, and so I realized that there was a lot of demand from parents about the quality of the food that was being offered to children in the school food lunch program. So we started brainstorming, what can we offer to them? How we can connect to these young generations with their food heritage. They deserve to be connected with their food heritage. And so because of the lack of infrastructure for food processing, storage, and distribution, we started brainstorming about creating a product inspired by pemmican. And so when I started working with Dr. Who, we started looking at what are the food products that are in the reservation, promoting food sovereignty. And so one of the first ingredients of our project is bison. And we look at Indian rice grass after having several conversations with K.N. Miller, who is current graduate student also in laboratory. We started discussing about the potential of using Indian rice grass. And so Indian rice grass has multiple benefits for the environment, and it's being used in, this crop is being used for mitigate soil erosion, and it's also being used to feed animals. And so we realized that it has a lot of potential, it has a great source of complex carbohydrates, and it's gluten-free. And we have been constantly hearing that majority of Native Americans require a diet gluten-free because the original diet, pre-colonization diets, did not contain any gluten. And so that's why we look into Indian rice grass. And now we're also working with sorghum, which can be produced in US. And we are also trying to add a different flavor to make it savory but also sweet to fulfill the requirements of our co-developers and also our target market, which in this case are the children of the Boys and Girls Club. And so our product development process, which is a process in which we want to practice cultural appreciation, and we want these kids to be able to connect with their food heritage. And so we're being ideated, and we presented to them our first prototype in which we added the meat in it. And then we hear their feedback, and we work again, and we present a new iteration, and now we're in the process of creating a concept. And so this is how Indian rice grass looked like. The first time I saw it, I was like, okay, I don't know how am I going to work with it. And I started Googling, and I found little information about the uses of Indian rice grass. And then I've been told, okay, why don't you go and check the sous chef cookbook? And what an inspiration, because I find out a couple of really amazing recipes, and the first prototype also had the name of one of the recipes. It's Wasna Bai, and Wasna mean all mixed up together in Lakota culture. And we're now evaluating this new concept with the kids because we want them to give a unique identity to the product, something that reflects what they actually are. And we're using bison meat as a source of protein and huckleberries to add the sweet taste that kids have. And so right now we have a new hands-on concept. And so you're gonna get a cracker, and separately you will receive huckleberry jam and bison meat crisps. So you can spread as much as jam you want, and on top sprinkle some bison meat crisp, and have these more like a sandwich cracker that you can work with your own hands. And yeah, I hope you really like it. You can try it. It's a really different and unique concept, and we're looking forward to continue working with the kids and getting their feedback to take this product to the next step. And we're really thankful with the personnel from the Boys and Girls Club for being really open to work with us.
Thank you so much, Genesis. Next.
Oh, and
Yeah, we both had some questions we really were hoping to ask and maybe get your feedback, and anyone else who has thoughts and wants to chime in. We're just going to be switching off on those. But my first thought, fortunately I'm better at remembering faces than names, but I was at a presentation recently, and was an Indigenous presenter bringing up the idea of modification versus kin. And as a food product development lab, and developing products, it's kind of that direct product of modification in its basic form. And there's always a trade-off between kind of what James was touching on too, is it giving or is it taking? And wondering how, Sean, for example, you in this business balance the importance of a traditional ingredient versus some necessary modification or presenting it in a space that may be economically viable, and how you balance that or see that trade-off. If you want, sure.
And I think it's really important that we strive to get more Indigenous food products out there in the market. We prioritize purchasing from Indigenous producers first, and with our restaurant, we've been very busy. And with our nonprofit kitchen, we were doing up to 10,000 meals a week throughout the whole pandemic winter. And with the restaurant, it's just been so crazy busy. So our purchasing power has gotten really big, which has been great. So we're able, just the other day, I had a friend of mine from Potawatomi in Michigan drop off like 1,200 pounds of dried corn and about 50 gallons of maple vinegar, which we'll be able to use over the next few months. Some of it might even last us a year, we'll see. But we're going through a ton of cool corns and beans and squash and things like that. But there really needs to be really cool native products out there. There's a huge opportunity for people to create native products and get them out there. One of the things that we realized is that it's hard to go from cottage industry of just making your own ingredients and packaging them yourself and then getting them out there. That takes a lot of effort, of course. And then to get to the next level of trying to get anything into some kind of grocery store or any kind of distribution, you have to go through a co-packer, and it becomes almost unattainable because you need tens of thousands of dollars, lots of product. And there's a lot of recipe testing. There's a big chance that you won't make any money with all the money you spend trying to get into that part. So part of the work that we've done with our nonprofit is set ourselves up to get the licensing to be kind of a small to medium-sized co-packer to be able to work with Indigenous peoples and help them produce things. So we've been working with a local group in Minnesota who grew out a bunch of squash and beans and things like that. And we're helping them to create a line of baby food called Indigibaby that it'll be just all packed and ready to go. And it's a big project for us. It's our first learning of trying to get into that. But we'll be able to do it at a bigger scale than they could because we have bigger equipment. We can invest in some of the machinery it takes to get it there. But it's just going to be really important. And then for the restaurant, we're just putting food out there. We're just trying to normalize Indigenous foods, We're not trying to recreate all the traditional recipes of the past. There's a lot of traditional recipes that are very sacred to some of us in all parts. So we're just creating different recipes using Indigenous ingredients. So we're looking at it as a modern-day Indigenous pantry and creating a lot of recipes around that. And staying strict to, for us, trying to use only Indigenous ingredients as much as we can and trying to not fusionize the ingredients too much so they taste like where we are. So I think that's a really important part too because it's just really fun to play with and it's a challenge, So we cut out the dairy, the wheat flour, the cane sugar, the beef, pork, and chicken, and we just focused on where we are and just understanding the immense diversity, So we're looking at North America as a whole, from Mexico through Alaska, and all of the crazy diversity, and all of this wonderful regional foods that are out there, and just working with people to be creative about creating recipes of these regions and everywhere, So I just think there's so much opportunity, and the more we do, the more we normalize it, and trying to give those opportunities to Indigenous peoples, because some non-Indigenous peoples might want to swoop in and try to capitalize off of it. That's just the full form of how it works. But we can have conversations about what they're doing, and are they doing it just to capitalize and make money, or using somebody else's culture to make money, which is cultural appropriation, So we just have to have all those things in mind as we move forward. Any other questions?
Yeah, so the follow-up question will be, what strategies will you implement to set competitive and accessible pricing for Indigenous food?
So whenever you're putting anything on the market, you're just looking at all the costs. That's just the basic business planning, because it's the cost of the machinery, it's the cost of the time and labor, it's the cost of whatever products you need, and that's how then you're just doing math. And it's all math when that comes down to it. Because if you know, like, a jar is going to cost you 30 cents, and then the ingredients going into it is another 50 cents, and it costs you maybe $20 of labor to make a whole bunch of these. And then you just balance all that out. But it's really important that you go through that whole process of looking at it to try and figure out what is a true value of that product once it's said and done, to be able to make that price. And then because we do have some nonprofit organizations out there, there are some monies out there for food relief, it is possible to create some products that hopefully could be supported to get to families that need it. So we've been working with the USDA a lot, and I'm really hoping that we can continue to have a relationship, and because with the FDPIR and the Commodity Food Program, they should be buying regional indigenous products from indigenous peoples and then redistributing those products back into that region. But we might not have to use the USDA, we might be able to create other groups that could do that same kind of work, and to be able to send out indigenous pantries to families that need it, and finding funding and monies to do that. So there's always solutions out there of trying to get there. So
You guys can sit down.
So the following question will be, how can academic groups better collaborate with community stakeholders like you to improve the accessibility of food system knowledge?
Yeah, I guess with that too, the fact of the nature, there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of big institutions to go through in academia, and as you're just talking about, is it necessary to, or do we look for bottom up kind of grassroots kind of stuff?
I think that the more we can create partnerships like we have here at Montana State, and we could work with some of these groups, because these guys have a lot of resources, and there are people on staff and faculty that want to help, that want to be able to figure out how to utilize this. And there's going to be a constant refresh of students coming in with these same goals of being able to utilize this. So I think it's painting a picture of how can we better utilize some of this indigenous focused education, and how can that support some of these community pieces, because we could use some of these facilities to help create some test products, for example, and try to figure out how do you scale them to become bigger. And just utilizing things on a scientific process, understanding how academia can help in many different ways, and especially when it comes to food safety, or if it comes to understanding nutritional values, and be able to have partners that could help us source out some of those nutritional values in real time, to be able to utilize that for some of the work. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration with higher education and academia. And for our nonprofit, that's what our hopes and goals are, that we are doing lots of research and development projects with higher educational facilities all over the country. So that way we can be doing all sorts of things, whether it's different regional agricultural experiments, or if it's just understanding different wild foods, or if it's understanding nutritional values, or understanding some of the traditional knowledge bases in those regions, and really understanding how we can adapt some of those knowledge bases into our own food systems. So I think there's just a lot of tie-in, obviously, and we have to use academia because there's people studying, but we also have to make it accessible so people who are not in academia can understand it. I think sometimes in academia people forget that a lot of people don't know what you're talking about, So sometimes we have to just bring it together, and that's why I feel like for us we use food, because food is such a common language. And through food and recipes, it makes people happy and it makes people see. And we can do some complex things through food. Like today we nixtamalized corn, within an hour and a half, and made a really simple stewed rabbit, and made this really simple rabbit and hominy broth, or brothy soup, and it was so simple, but really people could write volumes on just some of those pieces, But if you just do it in real time and show people, then there's just a lot of opportunities. So it's crossing over. It's recording things in academia and understanding that we have to be stewards of indigenous knowledge and education and preserve it for the future generations, because it's been in dire danger for the past few hundred years, and it's still being erased off the face of the earth today. So we have to do everything we can to steward as much as we can, and set up systems. And we're going to need a lot of really smart people, and we're just going to need a lot of people with a lot of passion, and we all need to work together.
Thank you. And this is a really important question coming from my experience to try to store ingredients for a product. And it's, how do you manage to ensure a constant food supply from
indigenous vendors?
So it's going to take a little time, but for us, we've been ramping up food supply and ramping up food demand, I should say. We've been ramping up the demand a lot over the past few years. So for example, there's a small native nonprofit farm just north of Minneapolis called Dream of Wild Health, and they just grow out. They're native-led, and they just do a lot of really amazing work. And we're their biggest clients when it comes to selling because they are selling some of their products at farmers markets, and they sell to us directly through a restaurant and our nonprofit kitchen. And we are able just to buy so much from them, But we can only buy, with the garden, we're only getting what's in season at that moment. So we are able to work with other indigenous companies who have gotten much bigger. So there's Bow and Arrow Corn Company out of Colorado. They're part of the Ute Mountain Tribe. We buy a lot of corn from them because we just want to buy from indigenous producers first. And Ramona Farms is another big partner of ours. So we buy an immense amount of Ramona Farm product because they have just all these different kinds of colored corns and the temperi beans, which are super cool and could be a real game changer for some crops as things get more drought. There's just things as the world changes, because that particular crop doesn't need a lot of water and it's drought resistant. And it produces a lot, but there's just a lot of opportunity, and we're going to keep working to create more and more demand. And we're going to see more producers coming up with stuff, but we also have to be flexible, knowing that some people are only going to be able to produce X amount, and then we just have to be prepared for that. And as we're writing menus with our restaurant and all the things, we're just very flexible of what we can and can't do. So like I would love to put some things that were traditional to me, like the tipsila, which is a prairie turnip, but that's just not going to happen for quite a while to come until we have more permacultural landscapes to be able to produce those things in mass. So we might be able to get a few braids of tipsila here and there to do for some special dinners or a couple special occasions, but knowing that it's something that I couldn't just put on the menu because there's just not enough supply of it. So it's just being aware of the supply chains of everything and just being adaptive. And that's why for us we created a lot of atypical recipes because we're just doing something new. And plus that way nobody can say we're doing it wrong. If we're just creating it, we're just making it up. So.
But how do you visualize enhancing access to indigenous products by consumers?
So we're hoping that we can see a lot more indigenous food businesses out there. We're working on an indigenous food market in Minneapolis right now that we're hoping that we replicate and can help move around the nation. I'm working on a project which I haven't really told our nonprofit yet, but as we're creating the market space, I also want to create small extension pieces where we can sell shelving to go into small community stores so that they can just get rid of a couple of shelves of chips. Then we can have some space to sell some indigenous food product, and we can give them an easy to order from kit to refresh those products and to find out how much they need. So at least there'd be a little bit of access, And it's just putting it out there and coming up with ways because I grew up on Pine Ridge. When I was growing up in the 70s, we didn't even have a restaurant on Pine Ridge at all. And we had the one main grocery store in Pine Ridge to service that entire area that's almost the size of Connecticut. So it's pretty insane how little food access is still out there. I mean, now we have a Taco John's, which is almost food. But anyways, we just need to get healthy indigenous foods out there. We just need to get our own indigenous foods. We don't have to call them healthy because they just happen to be healthy, So we just need to see, and it's an education issue. We need most people probably don't even know what to do if they have a bag of dried corn, and all the possibilities that you can do with that bag of dried corn. So a lot of this is education, so that's why the other side of our nonprofit, we're pushing into that. So we're going to be just releasing a ton of video work around working with food. All these different ways you can play with corn because you can just grind it into a flour and make a simple polenta or grits. Or you can nixtamalize that and turn it into hominy, or you can grind that up into a masa for tortillas and tamales. There's all these things that you can do, or you can make a non-nixtamalized corn dough and do all sorts of stuff like arepas and things. So there's just so many possibilities, and it's just teaching people. And the same with all these other products, because we're making bean flours and we're making bean cakes, we're making all these things. We're not using any of the dairy or any flour or any chicken eggs or anything like that. We're just letting the food be what it is and kind of creating a modern possibilities of what we can do with indigenous foods. So it's going to be important. like, again, another collaboration. We could just be coming up with all sorts of challenges of things we could do with student groups and professors, you know. So it's just countless, and you know, there's just no reason to not to at this point, you know. And it's really, we need to get more of the tribal leadership really in tune with what food sovereignty is and why it's important. Because we need to be building infrastructures out there, you know. We need to be creating that access on those levels. But you know, the tribes are slow to adopt this a lot of times. Even tribes with lots of resources, and it's going to take time. But we're happy that we have our big restaurant in Minneapolis, which just serves as a proof of concept that we can have a decolonized restaurant run by largely indigenous peoples, and be able to really be proud of the food that we're putting out there. So.
Thank you very much for your response.
Also, people here, if you have any questions, I have one most important question. How do those products taste?
Oh, so good, yeah. So good. I mean, I think it's just fun to be creative, right? It's fun to come up with, see what can you get? These are my ingredients, these are my pantry items, and what products can we create? And just continuously learning and growing with them. And, you know, looking at indigenous peoples all across the Americas and how they're doing things everywhere, you know? Because there's indigenous peoples globally, you know, and we have to recognize that we're all in the same boat together as indigenous peoples. And we have to preserve our knowledge and our heritage through food, especially. And we have to, you know, find the ways that we as indigenous peoples have lived sustainably for thousands of generations before, utilizing community-based food programs, you know. And just identifying what that means, and taking the time to identify indigenous education and why that's important and what that means. And start to slowly create systems that replace colonial education systems with some of our indigenous education systems, you know, because it's going to be it's just better. Like, you know, we should be knowing the names of every single trees out here, not just their English names, but the true names of the soil that they're sitting in, and those names too. And so there's just a lot of work to do.
Do we have any questions from here? Or any comments? Well, if not, thank you so much. This is the very, very meaningful last 1.5 hours that you share with us. Please let us know how you feel about those products, how you feel about our project, and then don't forget to go to Chef Sherman's keynote tonight at 7 in Inspiration Hall. Thank you so much.